Ever wondered how an entire historical era gets its name?
Hmm.
Or why certain periods, like the one we're diving into today, are called, rebirths?
Right.
It makes you question, did people living through it even use that label? Or was it something invented much later?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to cut through the noise, get to the heart of the Italian Renaissance. We've sifted through a ton of sources, articles, research, historical texts to bring you the essence, the really key nuggets about this transformative period.
And, this deep dives isn't just about dates and famous paintings, though we'll touch on those. It's really about understanding the complex tapestry of ideas, economics, and, individual genius that sparked a whole cultural revolution.
Or revolution, yeah.
We're going to explore some conflicting viewpoints on its very definition, actually, and unpack some surprising details, like how it was even named in the first place. It reveals so much about how, history gets written.
Okay, so let's unpack that first point then. The term Renaissance, people living through it didn't use it.
No, not really.
So imagine going back in time and asking, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, hey, are you guys Renaissance artists?
They'd probably just stare at you blankly.
Right. Utterly confused. I mean, Michelangelo might have just barely heard the word coined near the end of his life, but that's it. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us a lot about the power of historical categorization. Historians often label periods way after the fact, using terms the cultures themselves never use.
Okay.
The word Renaissance means rebirth in French, interestingly, was actually coined by an Italian artist and architect.
Giorgio Vasari.
Vasari.
Right.
Yeah, in 1568, in his famous book, Lives of the Artists, he's pretty much considered the father of modern art history.
So he had a reason for calling it that, an agenda.
Oh, definitely. Vasari had an agenda. As an Italian artist, and his patron was Cosimo de' Medici, he aimed to paint a specific picture. He argued that art in Italy had, sort of deteriorated during the Middle Ages, especially under Northern influence. He even coined the term Gothic as like a barbarian slur to describe it.
Oh, wow, really? Gothic as a slur.
Yeah. His narrative was that Italians were the ones who truly reinvented classical art, brought it back to life. For Vasari, you couldn't have a rebirth without a sort of death of the previous style, you see.
That's a powerful way to frame it. So if the term was invented later and by someone with a clear bias, does that mean the rebirth was maybe more of a gradual evolution? Not such a clean break from the medieval period? What do scholars argue?
That's exactly the debate. It's fascinating, particularly among medievalists.
Right.
They argue it was more of a continuation. They point to earlier classical influences in medieval art, like Nicholas Pisano's pulpit in Pisa from the 13th century.
Okay, what about it?
It clearly shows a classical contrapposto figure, where the figure stands with weight mostly on one foot.
Ah, that natural S-curve pose.
Exactly. Very relaxed, very human, totally different from the stiff poses common then. So this suggests artists were already kind of moving towards classicism and naturalism for centuries.
So it wasn't completely out of the blue.
Not entirely. But despite that debate, something genuinely different and crucially intentional was happening in Italy compared to, say, the North.
Intentional how?
Well, in Northern Europe, the increase in naturalism seems more like a gradual development of existing styles, just getting better at what they were already doing.
Okay.
But in Italy, it felt like a deliberate effort to look back, to copy classical prototypes. They consciously kind of hit reset on the art trends, actively seeking out Greek and Roman forms. There was this intense antiquarian mania collecting things, studying prototypes.
Pulling the record off the player, as you put it earlier.
Exactly, a conscious choice to emulate Greece and Rome.
So if this rebirth was so intentional, let's talk about the where and why. Why Italy? What made this peninsula the cradle for all this change?
Right. Well, several key factors really converge there. First, you've got profound geographical and economic advantages.
Okay.
Italy's slap bang in the middle of the Mediterranean. Great for trade with Europe, Asia, Africa.
Right, the trade routes.
Exactly. And that led to immense wealth. Think Florence and its banking power, Venice as this bustling commercial hub. This money directly funded the arts and new ideas. You need the cash to make it happen.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, the political environment was, unique. Italy wasn't a unified country then, not until the 19th century.
Just city-states.
Yeah, a collection of independent city-states and republics. Florence, Venice, Rome, Milan, often fortified. And the Pope ruled the Papal States like a political leader, too.
And that helped, being separate.
It did. It allowed local cultural interests to flourish without, interference from some overarching national power. More freedom for patrons and artists to experiment.
Interesting. Okay, so money, politics. What about ideas?
That's the third point. A massive intellectual and philosophical shift. Rational inquiry started to gain ground over medieval theology. It was a period of exceptional growth and change, culturally, intellectually.
And this is where humanism comes in.
Precisely. Humanism. Francesco Petrarch is often called the father of humanism.
Right.
The focus shifted to human potential, studying ancient texts, using human reason, exploring free will. Petrarch himself hunted down lost classical texts like Cicero's writings, bringing back this sort of forgotten intellectual heritage.
Wow.
And humanism led to new fields, like philology studying language history. Lorenzo Valla was key here. By analyzing the Latin in old church documents, he could tell if they were actually written centuries later than claimed.
Based on the Latin. That's clever.
Yeah. Subtle differences in word usage, grammar, it allowed him to question the authority of some documents, which was a big deal. Challenged the status quo.
Okay, so humanism is huge. What else?
Fourth factor, patronage. Absolutely crucial.
Wealthy families.
Exactly. Families like the Medici in Florence. Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent, was incredibly influential.
Yeah.
He funded artists, thinkers, gathered brilliant minds.
Ah, and that links back to Vasari, right? His patron was a Medici.
Yes, Cosimo I, a descendant. So Vasari's writings have this heavy Medici focus. It really shows how who paid the bills shaped the art and culture we remember.
Okay. One last factor you mentioned, the darker one.
Yeah, finally, we can't ignore the Black Death. The plague, devastating, swept Europe, mid-14th century, wiped out maybe 40% of the population.
30%. The impact must have been enormous.
Huge. Psychologically, spiritually, many saw it as divine punishment. So you see this surge in piety, church donations, even flagellation.
Right.
And art reflects this, like Andrea Orcagna's Strassi altarpiece. It shows Christ as this more powerful, almost punishing God, an austere turn.
But you also mentioned a kind of opposite reaction.
Exactly. The irony is it also led some to adopt this eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow we die attitude. Plus, demographic shifts meant labor was worth more, freeing up wealth, which again could fuel patronage. So, really complex effects.
That paradox piety and carpe diem side by side really paints a much richer picture. It shows how people adapted. And it's against this backdrop, this really complex mix, that the art starts changing dramatically. So let's dive into that. What were those early artistic currents before the full bloom?
Right, before Giotto really shook things up, Italy was this melting pot of styles. Byzantine influence was still incredibly strong, especially earlier on.
What did that look like?
Think gold backgrounds, very spiritual, almost abstract figures, like Margarito di Arezzo's Virgin and Child Enthroned. Christ might look more like a small adult than a baby. Vasari, of course, called it crude because it wasn't naturalistic.
He has Janda again.
Exactly. But it was sophisticated in its own way, just focused on spiritual reality, not earthly looks.
Okay, Byzantine. What else?
We also saw Romanesque and Gothic influences coming down from the north, more linearity, kind of flowing lines, and early attempts at space. You see artists trying to make things look three-dimensional using lines called orthogonals.
The lines that go back into the picture.
Yeah, but true linear perspective, the mathematical system with a single vanishing point, hadn't been figured out yet. So the lines recede, but kind of haphazardly. You can see them grappling with it.
Trying to figure out depth.
Right. And then there's a really transformative figure, not an artist, but St. Francis of Assisi.
Okay. How did he influence art?
He died in 1226, but his emphasis on a more personalized, humanized Christ was huge. He invented the Christmas crib, the nativity scene.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It shifted the focus from this remote, awesome God to a more relatable human figure. And that desire for more human feeling fed directly into the art.
I see. So who picked up on that first?
Well, Cimabue is a key transitional figure here. His Sta Trinita Madonna, for instance. It still has Byzantine echoes, gold background, that sort of thing. But you see a real effort towards making Mary and Jesus more humane, more solid, more three-dimensional.
Trying to make them look like they have weight.
Exactly, a greater sense of volume. Cimabue was super famous back then. Dante even mentions him in the Purgatory, basically saying Cimabue thought he was the top dog, but now Giotto's all the rage.
Ah, the changing tides of fame. So that brings us to Judo.
Yes, Giotto di Bondone, a true proto-Renaissance master. The story goes Cimabue found him sketching sheep on a rock with a stick and took him on as an apprentice.
A natural talent.
Seems so. And Gino really marks a break. He pursued naturalism, emotional depth, a revolutionary sense of space. His figures look solid, like they occupy real space. Sometimes his halos even overlap faces, which sounds simple, but it creates this amazing sense of depth.
Where can we really see this?
His absolute masterpiece is the Arena Chapel, the Scrivagni Chapel in Padua. Around 1304-1313, Vasari claimed Geno rescued and restored art here.
High praise.
And you can see why.
Yeah.
Look at the lamentation over the dead Christ. The raw emotion on the faces, humans and angels. It's incredible. But it's not just emotion. Giotto uses the landscape itself. There's this rocky ledge that swoops down, pointing your eye right to Christ and Mary.
Directing the viewer.
Exactly. A narrative device. And his skill. He could paint fake marble, faux marble, and imitation expensive stone like giallo antico so convincingly.
Saving the patrons money.
Yep. And elevating the artist's status. No longer just a craftsman, but a skilled, creative professional.
Okay, Giotto sounds pivotal. Was everyone following his lead?
Well, happening at the same time, but with a different flavor, was the Sienese school.
Siena, another city-state.
Right. While Giotto in Florence was all about solid forms, drama, realism, the Sienese style was often more lyrical, more emphasis on flowing lines, elegance, decoration.
So less chunky, more flowy.
Kind of, yeah. Think Duccio di Buoninsegna, his huge Maestà altarpiece for Siena Cathedral. It shows this new tenderness between Mary and Jesus. And on the back panels, like Christ's entry into Jerusalem, you see those early perspective attempts, the orthogonals starting to recede, but still mixed with older medieval ideas like making background figures bigger if they're important.
Okay, Duccio. Who else from Siena?
Simone Martini. His Annunciation from 1333 is just exquisite. Amazing detail in the plants, the vase, the angel's expression. It blends realism with that elegant Sienese line and a very Gothic feel look at the angel's posture, that graceful Gothic sway, the beautiful drapery.
So Gothic wasn't just a slur for Vasari, it was an actual style influence.
Absolutely. These styles coexisted and mingled. And then you have the Lorenzetti brothers, Pietro and Ambrogio.
Right.
Pietro did a deposition that really captures the weight of Christ's body, intense grief. But it's Ambrogio's frescoes and Siena's town hall, the Palazzo Pubblico, that are really famous.
The allegory of good and bad government.
That's the one. Major stuff. Less about religion, more about humanistic ideals, how a city should run. You see justice, peace, the common good personified. One side shows a thriving city, happy people, prosperity under good rule.
And the other.
Tyranny, decay, violence, suffering under bad government. It's a powerful visual message about civic life, reflecting those humanist ideas.
It's so clear from all these examples that something profound was shifting. And connecting back to what you said earlier, the sources seem to stress this unique intentionality in Italy. It wasn't just artists getting better, right? What really made the Italian approach to naturalism and classicism different?
Exactly. It boils down to a few key things. First, Italy had direct access to the Roman legacy.
Because they were living right on top of it.
Literally, it was the homeland of the Roman Empire. Ruins everywhere, artifacts constantly being dug up. Artists didn't have to guess. They could see Roman sculptures, buildings, ancient sarcophagi were reused as fountains. Michelangelo studied specific Roman sculptures like the Belvedere torso. The past was physically present.
So they could copy it directly.
Yes, which leads to the second point. A greater degree of historicism. Italian naturalism wasn't just an evolution. It was a deliberate attempt to copy prototypes of Greek and Roman art.
What kinds of things were they copying?
Naturalism, definitely, but also idealism, showing figures in their perfect youthful forms. Monumental freestanding sculpture, which had largely disappeared in the Middle Ages. Classical architectural orders. Compare Michelangelo's David to an ancient Greek statue like Polykleitos' Doraphoros the Anatomy. The contrapposto pose, it's a direct conscious reference.
Okay, so direct access, deliberate copying. Humanism must play in here too.
Massively. Humanism's influence drove the collection and sharing of classical knowledge, including myths. Classical stories never totally vanished, but in the Renaissance, they exploded as subject matter. Think Botticelli's Birth of Venus, Raphael's School of Athens. These are celebrations of ancient themes.
And you mentioned a fusion, classical and Christian together.
Yeah, that's maybe one of the most fascinating aspects, the fusion of classical and Christian. Raphael's rooms in the Vatican, the Stanza della Segnatura, are prime examples. One wall has the Disputa, a deep Christian theological debate.
Right.
And right opposite, you have Apollo on Mount Parnassus with the Muses' pure classical mythology. It shows this kind of peaceful coexistence and integration. The Sistine Chapel ceiling itself puts these monumental, classically inspired nudes right into Old Testament stories.
Incredible. It wasn't seen as contradictory.
Apparently not, or at least they found ways to harmonize it intellectually. But sometimes they got things a bit wrong, which is also interesting.
Understandings. Like what?
But you know how Michelangelo's figures sometimes look almost like bodybuilders? Super muscular.
Yeah, very powerful.
He was trying to recreate the classical Greek ideal, but he was likely looking more at Hellenistic sculptures, a later Greek style that was more exaggerated and dramatic. So his classical ideal was based on a later interpretation. It's like that game of telephone.
A misunderstanding that creates a whole new look.
Exactly. And another big one. Ancient statues, Greek and Roman, were originally brightly painted.
Painted, not white marble.
Nope. But by the Renaissance, centuries of weather had worn the paint off. So artists saw these clean white marble figures and thought that was the classical ideal. They preferred that look, and it influenced Western art for centuries, this idea of pure white classical sculpture. A total misunderstanding became the benchmark.
That's incredible. A mistake that basically redefined beauty for hundreds of years. So after all this change, this explosion of art and ideas,
Yeah.
where can you, our listener, experience this legacy today? Where can we see it firsthand?
Oh, the legacy is incredibly tangible. It's preserved in so many places.
Like the key cities.
Absolutely. Start with Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance. Brunelleschi's massive dome on the cathedral is just breathtaking engineering, still dominates the city. Then there's the Palazzo Vecchio, the Old Town Hall, Donatello's sculptures. It's everywhere.
And
Rome, obviously crucial. The Vatican became this huge cultural hub. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling and his Last Judgment. You just have to see them. And Raphael's frescoes in the Vatican Museum's mastery of perspective, emotion.
Okay. Florence, Rome, elsewhere.
Milan has Leonardo da Vinci's legacy, The Last Supper in the Convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie. Its use of perspective, the psychology of the figures, it's profound. Shows his genius, funded by patrons like Ludovico Sforza.
And Venice always feels a bit different.
Venice is unique. Major trade power, so you get this amazing blend of styles, Gothic, Byzantine. St. Mark's Basilica is a great example, and it fostered incredible painters like Titian, known for color and light.
So cities themselves are living museums. What about actual museums?
Of course, museums and collections are vital. The Uffizi Gallery in Florence is packed with masterpieces. Botticelli, Michelangelo, Da Vinci. The Accademia Gallery, also in Florence, has the actual David. The Vatican Museums in Rome, naturally. And the Ambrosian Library in Milan has Da Vinci's notebooks, his scientific sketches. Even places outside Italy, like the National Gallery in London, has significant collections.
And keeping these safe must be a challenge.
Oh, hugely. Restoration efforts are constantly ongoing. In Florence, they work on the Duomo. Rome, famously, the Sistine Chapel cleaning revealed those vibrant colors. Milan works carefully on the Last Supper, which has always been fragile. Venice fights the water constantly. It's a continuous battle to preserve these treasures for future generations.
What an incredible journey we've taken, from just questioning the name Renaissance to the economics, the politics, the rise of humanism, and these just groundbreaking artistic leaps. It really was a period of profound change.
It truly was. The Renaissance, for all its complexities and maybe contradictions about being a rebirth, it fundamentally shifted Western thinking towards human potential, observation, a more scientific way of looking at the world. It impacted everything, anatomy, engineering, how we depict space and art. It really marked that transition from the Middle Ages to what we think of as modernity, laying the groundwork for so much that came after.
So as you reflect on this deep dive, here's a thought to leave you with. What historical labels do we use today that maybe future generations will look back on and question? And how might our own ideas about progress or what's important be shaped by our own agendas, just like Vasari's was? Or maybe think about creativity in your own field today. How does it balance looking back at history with pushing towards new innovation, much like those Renaissance masters did?